The moment that changed everything, the video began without warning. 1 second, the screen was dark. The next, a school hallway exploded into chaos. Lockers lined the walls like silent witnesses. Children's voices echoed, laughing, mocking, sharp like broken glass. The camera shook, clearly held by a trembling hand. Then the lens focused on a boy pressed against the lockers. Small, frail, his backpack lay open at his feet. Books scattered like fallen shields, his legs twisted unnaturally beneath him. A metal brace wrapped around his right leg, catching the fluorescent light. His hands shook as he tried to pick up a notebook, fingers stiff and slow. "Come on, robot boy," a voice sneered. "What are you gonna do? Glitch on us?" Laughter followed, cruel, loud, in a quiet penthouse overlooking the city. A man froze. Richard Heltek, billionaire, self-made. Feared in boardrooms and admired on magazine covers, stood perfectly still, tablet clenched in both hands. His tailored suit suddenly felt too tight. His breathing slowed, then stopped altogether. That's my son," he whispered. The boy on the screen was Ethan Hale, his son. His world, Richard had built empires from nothing. He had negotiated deals that crushed companies and reshaped industries. He had stared down rivals without blinking, but nothing prepared him for seeing his child cornered like prey. One of the boys kicked Ethan's notebook down the hallway. "Pick it up," another said. "Come on, genius. I thought your daddy was rich. Can't he buy you better legs?" Ethan's lips trembled. He tried to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. His eyes darted around, searching for help that never came. Students stood nearby, watching, whispering, recording. No, one stepped in. Richard's hands shook now. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the tablet harder. "Where are the teachers?" he muttered. "Where is anyone?" Then something changed. The laughter cut short. A shadow stepped into the frame. A girl. She couldn't have been more than 13. Braided hair pulled back tightly. A faded blue hoodie with frayed sleeves. Her backpack hung from one shoulder, worn thin at the seams. She stood between Ethan and the bullies without hesitation. "Back up." But it was steady. The biggest boy scoffed. "This doesn't concern you." She didn't move. "Yes, it does." Richard leaned closer to the screen, heart pounding. The boy laughed again. Or what? The girl took one step forward, placing herself fully in front of Ethan. She extended her arm, palm open like a barrier. "Or you go through me." A hush fell over the hallway. "You serious?" Another boy said. "You think you're some kind of hero?" She glanced back briefly, just long enough to meet Ethan's eyes. "You don't deserve this," she said to him. "None of it." Then she turned back to the bullies, jaw set. "Now leave." Richard felt something crack open in his chest. The boys hesitated. Not because they were afraid, but because confidence like hers was unfamiliar. Dangerous. One of them sneered. "What's your name, huh?" She lifted her chin. "My name doesn't matter." "Yes, it does," he said, stepping closer. "Because when this is over," she cut him off. "It's over now." Her words sliced through the air. A teacher's voice echoed from down the hall. The bullies backed away, throwing insults as they retreated. The girl didn't move until they were gone. Only then did she lower. Her arm she crouched beside Ethan, gathering his books gently, handing them to him one by one. "You okay?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded, though tears streaked his face. "Thank you," he whispered. She smiled a tired smile that carried more strength than any threat, any time. The video ended. The room was silent. Richard Hale stared at the frozen screen. His reflection stared back at him, his wet jaw trembling. A man stripped of every title and defense. He sank into a chair, tablet slipping from his hands for the first time in his life. Richard Hale felt powerless. His assistant's voice echoed faintly from behind him. "Sir, the board meeting starts in 10 minutes. He didn't answer. His mind replayed the moment again and again, the girl stepping forward. The way she shielded his son without knowing who he was. Without knowing who Ethan's father was? She didn't do it for money. She didn't do it for praise. She did it because it was right. Richard stood slowly. "Cancel everything," he said, "sir." I said, "Cancel everything." He turned back to the screen, eyes burning with something new, something dangerous. "Find her," he said quietly. "I want her name. Her family. Her school. Everything." "Yes, sir." Richard clenched his fists. "They hurt my son," he said, and the world watched. He looked out over the city skyline, glass towers reflecting the sun. "But that girl," he continued, voice low and resolute, "she reminded me who I used to be." His phone buzzed. A message from the school administration, subject: "Incident involving your son, please call." Immediately, Richard smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "No," he whispered. "You'll call me, somewhere across the city." The girl who had stood in that hallway had an idea that her single act of courage had just caught the attention of one of the most powerful men in the world. Nor could she imagine what his next move would be. Because when Richard Hale decided to act, lives changed, and this was only the beginning. Asterisk. The girl with nothing to love, morning came cold and gray. The kind that made the school's brick walls look heavier than usual. Ethan Hale sat in the back seat of his father's black SUV, staring out through tinted glass. As the building grew closer, students streamed inside, laughing, pushing, living like yesterday hadn't happened. Like cruelty was just another bell schedule. Ethan's hands clutched the strap of his backpack, so tight his fingers went pale. Richard Hale watched him from the opposite seat, saying nothing. His jaw was set, his eyes sharp, but inside him something was tearing. He hadn't slept. Not really. He kept seeing the same image. Ethan pinned to the lockers. Then the girl stepping in. That girl, by 4 a.m., he had her name, Aaliyah Carter. 13, honor student. Perfect attendance until last month. Lives in a small apartment complex on the east side. Mother, single parent, works 2 jobs. Aaliyah had no father listed on school records. Richard's investigator said it plainly. "She's poor, sir," Richard replied, even more plainly. "That doesn't matter." Now the SUV rolled to a stop. The driver opened the door. Richard stepped out, his shoes touching wet pavement. He looked like he belonged on a magazine cover, not in a school drop-off lane. The air seemed to change around him as parents recognized him, whispered, nudged each other. "Is that Richard Hale, the billionaire? What's he doing here?" Richard didn't glance at them. His focus was the building, its doors, its windows, its blind spots. Like it was a system he intended to hack. Ethan hesitated. Richard crouched beside him, voice low. "Listen to me. You didn't do anything wrong," Ethan swallowed. "But they said I don't care what they said." Richard's eyes softened. "You are my son, and no one gets to treat you like less." Ethan nodded slowly, but fear still clung to him. Richard straightened. "Today, you walk in with your head up. I'll handle the rest." Ethan stared at him. "Are you gonna get them in trouble?" Richard paused, then answered honestly. "Yes." Ethan's throat bobbed. "They'll hate me more." Richard leaned close. "If they hate you because you told the truth, that's not your burden. That's their shame." Ethan blinked fast. "What if it gets worse?" Richard's voice became stone. "Then I get stronger." Ethan stepped out of the SUV, and together they walked toward the entrance. Inside, the hallway smelled like floor wax and cheap perfume. Lockers slammed. Laughter bounced off the walls. Then a whisper traveled like a spark. "That's him. Robot boy." He brought his dad. Richard felt Ethan stiffen. He placed a hand on his son's shoulder, not gentle, not possessive, but steady. A signal, "I'm here." They reached the front office. The secretary looked up, eyes widening. "Mr. Hale." Richard didn't sit. "I'm here to speak to the principal." The secretary swallowed. "He's in a meeting." Richard smiled thinly. "Cancel it." 2 minutes later, Principal Dean Whitmore emerged, slick hair, polished smile. The kind of man who had mastered the art of sounding concerned while doing nothing. "Mr. Hale, what an honor." We take student safety very seriously, Richard raised a hand. Stop. The word landed like a slap. Whitmore blinked. Excuse me? I'm not here for your speech. Richard's voice was calm, but it carried weight. I'm here for answers. Whitmore glanced at Ethan. Ethan, I'm so sorry you experienced Richard. Cut him off again. Don't apologize to him like it's a weather event. This wasn't accidental. This was behavior. Repeated behavior. Whitmore's smile tightened. We're looking into it. Richard leaned forward. How many complaints have been filed about bullying in this school this year? Whitmore's eyes flickered. I don't have that number on hand. Richard nodded slowly, as if confirming something. You should. Because I do. Whitmore stiffened. Pardon? Richard pulled out his phone and slid it across the desk. A document was open. Numbers, dates, names, redacted. 32 reports, Richard said. 11 involving physical intimidation. For involving students with disabilities, all investigated. None resolved. Whitmore's throat went dry. Where did you get that? Richard's smile was cold. Don't worry about that. Worry about why it exists. Whitmore tried to recover. Mr. Hale, schools are complicated environments. Richard's voice sharpened, just slightly. No, protecting kids is not complicated. The principal's cheeks reddened. What exactly do you want? Richard took a slow breath. I want the students who bullied my son identified by the end of today. I want their parents in this office by tomorrow morning. I want a written plan for preventing this from happening again, real consequences. Real monitoring by the end of the week. Whitmore's mouth opened, but no sound came. And Richard continued, eyes narrowing. I want to meet the student who defended my son. Whitmore blinked. The student. Richard's tone softened a fraction. Aaliyah Carter. The principal's face changed. Something like discomfort crossed it, Aaliyah. He said slowly. Yes, well, she's a good girl. Richard tilted his head. Why does it sound like you're about to insult her? Whitmore forced a laugh. Not at all. She's just had some difficulties lately. What kind of difficulties? Whitmore looked away. Attendance issues. Behavior concerns. Richard's jaw tightened. She stepped between my disabled son and 3 bullies. If that's your definition of behavior concern, we have a bigger problem. Whitmore cleared his throat. We'll call her in. Then sat in a chair near the wall, silent. Richard glanced at him. You okay? Richard murmured. Ethan nodded, but his eyes were down. Ethan, Richard said gently, look at me. Ethan raised his eyes. You didn't ask for this. But you also don't have to hide, Ethan whispered. I hate being different. Richard's chest tightened. He sat beside him. Son, I built a billion-dollar company with a stutter and a hand that didn't work right after an accident. Richard paused. People mocked me. They called me broken. Ethan stared, surprised. He'd never heard this. Richard's eyes shone. And you know what I learned? What? Ethan asked. Richard leaned closer. The world will always try to measure you by what you lack. But real strength is what you build anyway. Ethan swallowed hard. You're not less, Richard said. You're rare. The office door opened. Aaliyah Carter walked in. She held her chin high, but her eyes were cautious. Her hoodie was the same faded blue from the video. Her braids were neat, but the edges of exhaustion showed in her face like sleep was something she borrowed, not owned. Principal Whitmore gestured stiffly. Aaliyah, sit. Aaliyah didn't sit. She looked at Ethan first. You okay? She asked him softly, like yesterday's hallway was still in her mind. Ethan nodded. Yeah, thanks. Aaliyah looked at Richard next, and for a second her eyes widened, not starstruck, but alert. Like she recognized danger disguised as elegance. Richard stood. Aaliyah, he said. My name is Richard Hale. Aaliyah's expression didn't change. I know who you are. Whitmore interjected quickly. Aaliyah, this is Ethan's father. He wanted to Aaliyah cut him off without raising her voice. He wanted to ask why I did it. Whitmore stiffened. Excuse me. Aaliyah kept her gaze on Richard. That's what rich people ask when somebody does something for free. Richard blinked. Then something unexpected happened. He smiled. A real smile. Small, respectful. You're sharp, he said. Aaliyah shrugged. My mom calls it mouthy. Richard nodded. Your mom sounds honest. Aaliyah's face tightened at the mention of her mother. Like it was a bruise. Richard didn't miss it. I watched the video, he said. I saw you step in. Aaliyah's eyes hardened. And I want to thank you, Aaliyah scoffed quietly. Thanks don't stop bullies. Richard's smile faded. No, but action does. Whitmore cleared his throat. Now, Aaliyah, as you know, fighting is against school policy, and we can't have Aaliyah snapped her head toward him. I didn't fight. I stopped a fight. Whitmore's tone became stern. Still, you escalated the situation, Aaliyah laughed, once sharp, humorless. Escalated. So if I watch a kid get hurt, that's calm. But if I stand up, that's escalation. Whitmore's cheeks reddened. Watch your tone. Aaliyah's eyes glistened, but she didn't let a tear fall. My tone is what you hear when you don't like the truth. Richard turned slowly to Whitmore. Is she in trouble for defending my son? Whitmore hesitated. We have to follow guidelines. Richard's voice dropped into something colder. Answer the question. Whitmore swallowed. There were reports that Aaliyah has been disruptive. She's had detentions. Aaliyah's voice rose. Because I fall asleep in class? Whitmore snapped. That's not an excuse. Aaliyah's face twisted, and the armor cracked for a moment. You know why I fall asleep? Because I'm up at night helping my mom. Because she works late and I watch my little brother. Because sometimes the lights get shut off and he's scared. And she stopped abruptly. As if realizing she'd revealed too much, the room fell silent. Richard felt his throat tighten. He looked at her, really looked. This wasn't a rebellious kid who liked trouble. This was a child carrying adult. Wait, Richard spoke carefully. Aaliyah? Why didn't you tell the school? Aaliyah's laugh was bitter. Tell the school so they can look into it like they look into bullying. Her eyes cut to Whitmore. Y'all don't look, she said quietly. You just wait for stuff to go away. Richard's hands curled into fists. Then he turned to Aaliyah again, voice gentle but firm. Do you want to leave the school? Aaliyah blinked. What? Whitmore instantly reacted. Mr. Hale, that's not Richard, ignored him. I can move you, Richard said. Private academy, scholarships, tutoring, whatever you need. Aaliyah stared at him like he'd offered her a spaceship. Then her face hardened again. No, Richard paused. No. Aaliyah's voice shook slightly. I'm not a charity case. Richard's tone stayed calm. That's not what this is. Yes, it is, Aaliyah said, eyes shining now. You feel guilty because your kid got hurt. So you want to fix it by throwing money at the girl who helped? Ethan looked between them, confused and tense. Richard inhaled slowly. Aaliyah, I'm not trying to buy you. Aaliyah's voice softened, but the pain in it was louder than anger. Everybody tries to buy something. Teachers buy silence with detentions. Kids buy popularity with cruelty. And rich people. She met his eyes. Rich people buy control. Whitmore shifted uncomfortably, almost relieved she was accusing Richard. Not him. Richard held her gaze. Then he said something that changed the air. You're right, Aaliyah blinked. Richard's voice was low, honest. Most people with money do buy control. He took a step closer, not threatening, just present. But I don't want control over you, he said. I want to protect what you did. Aaliyah's brows furrowed. Protect it. Richard nodded. That kind of courage is rare, and this world punishes it. Aaliyah swallowed. So, what do you want then? Richard looked at Whitmore, then back to her. I want the truth, he said. What really happens in these halls when adults aren't watching? Aaliyah's lips parted slightly. Whitmore's voice cut in quickly. Mr. Hale. We have protocols for reporting? Richard snapped his head. Toward him, be quiet, he said softly. Whitmore went pale. Richard returned his focus to Aaliyah. I'm going to dismantle this, he said. The bullying. The neglect. The system that protects the wrong people. Alia's eyes searched his face. And I need someone inside, Richard added. Someone who sees what's real. Fuck, Ethan whispered. Alia? She didn't look away from Richard. You want me to spy? She asked. Richard didn't flinch. I want you to speak. When you see wrongdoing, document it. Tell the truth. Alia's breathing sped up. Why me? She asked. Richard answered without hesitation. Because when everyone else watched my son suffer, you stood. Alia looked down, jaw trembling. You don't know what's standing? Costs. Richard's voice became a quiet. Promise. Then I'll make sure you don't pay the price alone. Alia looked up sharply. The room felt like it was holding its breath, then principle. Whitmore's phone buzzed on his desk. He glanced at it, and his face went stiff. Richard noticed. What is it? Whitmore cleared his throat. Nothing. Richard's eyes narrowed. Show me. Whitmore hesitated. Richard stepped forward, took the phone, and read the message. His expression changed slowly at first. Then, like a storm rolling in, Alia's voice was small. What does it say? Richard lifted his gaze. They found the student who filmed yesterday, he said. Ethan leaned forward. So, we have proof? Richard's voice was darker now. Yes, he said. We have proof, Alia exhaled. Good. Richard stared at the phone, then said the words that made Alia's blood run cold. But the video that was sent to me. He looked at Whitmore like he could see through him. Is not the only video. Whitmore's face drained of color. Alia's stomach dropped. What do you mean? Richard turned the phone toward her. On the screen was a second file, a second clip, titled Alia Carter Fight Compilation. Alia's hands shook. Ethan's eyes widened. That's not real, right? Richard's voice was controlled fury. It's real, he said, and it's been shared. Alia's throat tightened. No, those were Whitmore stammered, Mr. Hale. Students make things up all the time, Richard snapped. Shut up. Alia's eyes filled, and for the first time her tough mask crumbled. That video, she whispered. That video is going to get me expelled. Richard looked at her, and then he said something that sounded like a verdict. Not if I move first. Alia's breath caught. Move first how? Richard stared at the screen, then lifted his eyes cold and determined. Because whoever made this, he said, isn't just bullying kids. His voice dropped to a whisper. They're building a case to destroy you. Alia's chest tightened like a fist had closed around her heart. Why would anyone? Richard cut her off. Because you stood up yesterday, he said. And someone powerful doesn't want you standing again. When the world is WATCHEHING, the red dot pulsed dot live dot in seconds, the numbers climbed in thousand. 2050. Comments flooded the screen faster than they could be read. What's happening? Is this real? That's Richard Hale. Protect that girl. Richard Hale held the phone steady, his face calm, controlled. But behind his eyes burned something ancient and dangerous, the fury of a father and the conviction of a man who no longer feared consequences. Outside the office, the pounding grew louder. Open the door. That girl is dangerous. Alia felt her chest tighten. Her name echoed in those shouts like a weapon turned against her. She pressed her back to the wall, arms wrapped around herself. Trying to stay upright, Ethan moved closer to her instinctively. Don't listen to them, he said quietly. They don't know you. Leah forced a small smile. Yeah, but they think they do. Richard angled the camera toward the door. Letting the noise be heard? This, he said into the phone, voice firm, is what accountability sounds like when people aren't used to it. Principal Whitmore stood frozen, sweat soaking through his collar. You're turning this into a circus, he muttered. Richard didn't even look at him. No, you did. I'm just lifting the tent. The office phone rang. Then rang again. And again, Miss Keller glanced at the caller ID and whispered local news. National news. The school board. Richard nodded once. Put them on hold, Whitmore snapped. You can't ignore the board. Richard finally turned to him. Watch me. He lowered the phone slightly and spoke to Alia. Not for the audience, just for her. I need your permission. Alia swallowed. For what? To show the full footage, Richard said. Your truth. Her heart slammed against her ribs. My face. My name. They already have both, Richard said gently. This is about context. About dignity. Alia closed her eyes. Images flashed through her mind, her mother's tired smile. Her little brother asleep on the couch. The nights she stayed strong because someone had to. She opened her eyes. Show it, she said. All of it. Richard nodded. He tapped the screen. The first clip played. It showed Alia at 11 years old, standing between her crying little brother and an older girl screaming insults. The slap came first from the other girl. Then Alia shoved her away. Richard's voice narrated calmly. This was labeled violence. What it actually is protection. The comments exploded. She was defending him. That's self-defense. They lied. The second clip rolled. A dim stairwell. A boy cornering Alia, grabbing her wrist. Her voice cracked, shouting for him to stop. Then one punch. Richard didn't flinch. This was labeled aggression. It's called survival. The third clip played. Ethan's Mauler, shaking on the sidewalk after falling. Alia helping him up, supporting his weight. Then a teacher yelling at Alia for being late, shutting the classroom door in her face. The shove came after the insult. Ethan covered his mouth. I remember this. Alia's eyes burned with tears, but she didn't look away. Richard lifted the phone again. Facing the camera, this child was documented, he said evenly, but never protected. The comments shifted anger, replacing confusion. Who's the teacher? Name them. This school is corrupt. The office door suddenly burst open. 2 police officers stepped in, hands raised cautiously. Everyone stay calm, one said. We're here to restore order. Richard didn't stop filming. Officers, thank you for arriving. You're live, by the way. The officer stiffened. The second officer cleared his throat. Sir, we received reports of a disturbance. Richard turned the camera toward the window, where dozens of parents and adults pressed against the glass, shouting. Yes, Richard said. A disturbance fueled by misinformation sent through official school channels. One officer frowned. Is that true, Principal Whitmore? Whitmore's mouth opened, closed. We're still gathering facts. Richard smiled faintly. He's been gathering them for years. The officer turned back to Richard. Sir, we may need to escort the student for her safety. Alia's breath caught. Escort, like arrest, Richard answered before she could panic. Protective custody only happens with cause. The officer hesitated. There are parents accusing her of Richard cut in sharply. Accusing a child doesn't make it true. The officer nodded slowly. We'll secure the building. Outside. The chanting softened as phones came out. People watched the live stream, saw the clips, heard the truth. Confusion rippled through the crowd. A woman's voice yelled. Oh. That's not what the email said. A man shouted back, they lied to us. The mob began to fracture inside the office. Whitmore sank into his chair. This is out of control, he whispered. Richard leaned toward him, voice ice cold. No, this is accountability. His phone buzzed again. He glanced down, then inhaled sharply. Alia noticed. What now? Richard hesitated, then turned the screen toward her. A headline was already forming. Breaking. Billionaire exposes school cover-up after. Daughter of single mother targeted. Alia's knees nearly gave out. My mom. Richard nodded. She's been contacted. Alia's voice broke. She didn't ask for this. Richard's gaze softened. Neither did you. The phone rang again this time, a private line. Richard answered. Yes. A woman's voice trembled through the speaker. Mr. Hale. This is Marisol Carter, Alia gasped. Mom? Richard put the call on speaker. I'm with your daughter, Richard said. She's safe. Marisol's breath hitched. They showed me the video at work. People were staring. I thought. Alia rushed forward. Mom, I'm okay. I promise. There was silence. Then Marisol spoke, her voice shaking with pride and fear tangled together. Baby, did you do what they said? Aaliyah swallowed. I stood up for someone. Marisol exhaled slowly. Then you did right. Tears streamed down Aaliyah's face. I'm scared, she whispered. I know, her mother said softly. But you're not wrong. Richard felt his throat tighten. Miss Carter, he said, I give you my word. Your daughter will not face this alone. Marisol paused.
Why? Richard answered honestly.
Because the world needs to see what courage looks like. The call ended. The officers received messages through their radios. Crowd is dispersing, one said. Situation calming. Outside, some parents lowered their heads. Others walked away in silence. A few stayed, shame written across their faces. Inside the office, Whitmore whispered, The board. They're calling an emergency session. Richard nodded. Good. Aaliyah wiped her eyes. What happens to me now? Richard looked at her, then at Ethan. You go home, he said. You rest, and tomorrow? She asked. Richard's jaw set. Tomorrow, he said, we decide whether this school deserves you. Whitmore snapped. You can't threaten to pull students, Richard cut him off. I can pull funding, donations, partnerships. I can pull every spotlight that's been protecting you. Whitmore's face crumpled. You'll ruin me. Richard's voice was quiet and final. You ruined yourself. The officers gestured toward the hallway. It's clear. We'll escort you out. As they stepped into the corridor, students lined the walls, silent now, watching. Some stared at Aaliyah with awe, some with guilt. Some, with something like hope, Aaliyah kept her head high. At the exit, Ethan stopped her. Hey, he said softly. She turned. Thank you, he said. For seeing me? Aaliyah smiled through tears. Anytime. Outside, cameras flashed, but the shouting was gone. Richard opened the car door for Aaliyah. You sure you're ready for what comes next? He asked. Aaliyah nodded slowly. I've been ready my whole life. Richard closed the door and turned toward the school one last time. His phone buzzed. A final message. From his legal team, we identified. The staff account that uploaded the smear video. It belongs to Assistant Principal Laura Finch. She's lawyered up. Richard's eyes hardened. He whispered to himself. So that's how deep it goes. Inside the car, Aaliyah felt a chill she couldn't explain. Sir, she asked quietly. Yes. Why do I feel like this isn't over? Richard met her eyes in the rearview mirror. Because it isn't, he said. This was just the surface. The day courage went final. The city woke up different the next morning. Screens everywhere replayed the same image. A young black girl standing tall in a school hallway. Arm outstretched, refusing to move. Beneath it, a headline burned across the nation. When a child stood. Assistant fellow Aaliyah Carter sat at the small kitchen table in her apartment. Hands wrapped around a chipped mug of tea she hadn't touched. Sunlight crept through the blinds, catching dust in the air. The apartment felt quieter than usual, too quiet. Her little brother slept on the couch. Her mother moved slowly between the sink and stove. Pretending everything was normal, nothing was. Aaliyah. Her mother said gently, Your phone's been buzzing all morning. Aaliyah nodded. I know. Messages. Thousands of them. Support, hate, journalists, strangers calling her brave. Others calling her dangerous. Her mother finally sat across from her. Look at me, Marisol said. Aaliyah did. I don't care what anyone says, her mother continued, voice steady. You did the right thing. Aaliyah's eyes filled. What if it costs us everything? Marisol reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Baby, she said softly, we've had nothing before. But we've never had shame. Aaliyah broke then quiet tears. The kind that came from holding too much for too long. A knock came at the door. Both of them froze. Marisol stood slowly. I'll get it. When she opened the door, Richard Hale stood there, not in a suit, not surrounded by cameras. Just a man holding a folder. Good morning, he said respectfully. May I come in? Marisol studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside. Inside. Richard looked around not with judgment, but awareness. He sat when invited. I won't take much of your time, he said. I came to tell you what happens next. Alia's heart pounded. Is something wrong? Richard shook his head. No, something's finally right. He opened the folder and slid documents across the table. The school board voted at 6 a.m., he said. Principal Whitmore has been removed. Assistant Principal Finch resigned under investigation. A criminal inquiry has been opened for misuse of school systems and targeted harassment. Marisol covered her mouth. Alia stared. So, it's over. Richard met her eyes. The cover-up is over, he said. The consequences are just beginning. Our stomach tightened. For who? For everyone who thought silence was easier than justice. Later that day, the school auditorium was packed. Students, parents, teachers, cameras. Alia sat in the front row beside her mother. Ethan sat beside his father. His leg brace gleamed under the lights. The interim superintendent stepped up to the podium. We failed. We failed a child who showed more courage than the adults meant to protect her.
Ow.
Murmurs rippled through the room. She turned toward Alia. Alia Carter, she said, please stand. Alia's knees shook as she rose. The superintendent continued. Not to punish you, but to thank you. Applause started slowly. Then grew. Then thundered. Alia felt it wash over her warm, overwhelming. She caught Ethan's eye. He was clapping harder than anyone. The superintendent raised a hand for quiet. This district will implement mandatory anti-bullying oversight, independent reporting systems, and student advocates beginning immediately. She paused, and Alia Carter has been offered a full scholarship to any school of her choosing, public or private. The room buzzed. Alia felt every eye on her. She swallowed. May I say something? She asked. The superintendent nodded and stepped aside. Alia approached the microphone. Her hands trembled, but her voice didn't. I didn't stand up because I wanted attention, she said. I stood up because I was tired of watching people get hurt while everyone pretended not to see. Silence. She glanced at Ethan. When someone is different, she continued, the world tries to convince them they're less, but they're not. She looked out at the crowd, and neither am I. The applause this time was deafening. That evening, Richard and Ethan stood on the balcony of their penthouse. City lights stretching endlessly below, Ethan leaned against the railing. Dad, yes? Do you think she knows? How much she changed things? Richard smiled faintly. I think she's just getting started. Behind them, the door opened. Alia stepped out, the city wind lifting her braids. Richard turned. You didn't have to come. She smiled softly. I wanted to say goodbye. Ethan frowned. Goodbye! Alia nodded. I'm transferring schools. A fresh start. Ethan's shoulders fell. Oh, she stepped closer, but not far. Ethan smiled. Think small. Real. Thank you, he said. For being brave when I couldn't? Alia shook her head. You're braver than you think. Richard cleared his throat. Alia, he said, there's one more thing. She looked at him cautiously. I'm starting a foundation, he said. Student advocates. Legal protection. Resources for kids who stand up and get punished for it. Alia's eyes widened. You don't need me for that. Richard shook his head. Yes, he said. I do. She hesitated. Why? Richard answered simply. Because you know the cost, he said, and you paid it anyway. Alia looked out over the city at all those windows, all those stories. Then I'll help, she said quietly. As long as it's not about me? Richard smiled. It never was. Weeks later, a new plaque was mounted in the school hallway where everything had begun. It didn't name donors. It didn't list administrators. It read, Courage doesn't always come with power sometimes. It creates it, students passed it every day, and somewhere. Among them walked a boy with a brace on his leg head. Hi, somewhere else walked a girl with nothing to lose now, carrying hope instead, and the world learned. A lesson it had forgotten. It only takes one person to stand, for everyone else to rise.